The massacre of human children triggered Earth's full retaliation. HFY story. This document contains the complete historical account of what scholars now refer to as the Terror Incident, the single most devastating military response in recorded galactic history. The events described herein serve as both a historical record and a warning to future generations about the catastrophic consequences of underestimating a species' capacity for retaliation when their most vulnerable are threatened. The phrase, "the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," became humanity's battle cry during these events, though its origins and meaning would not be fully understood by the galactic community until much later. What follows is the complete account of how the massacre of innocent human children on the colony world of Haven's Rest triggered a response so overwhelming that it fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. Part 1. The Weak Made Strong. The Zephyrian hegemony had ruled the outer spiral arms for over 3 millennia. Their military doctrine was built on a foundation of overwhelming force applied to the weakest points of enemy civilizations. Children, the elderly, civilian populations, these were not merely acceptable casualties in Zephyrian warfare, they were primary targets. The philosophy was simple: break the spirit of a species by demonstrating that their most vulnerable could not be protected, and resistance would crumble. For centuries, this approach had proven devastatingly effective. Entire star systems had surrendered after witnessing the systematic extermination of their youth. The Zephyrians had perfected psychological warfare to an art form, and their reputation preceded them across the galaxy like a wave of terror. Humanity, however, was different in ways the Zephyrians could not comprehend. When the first human colony ships had ventured beyond the Sol system 200 years prior, they carried with them not just the hopes and dreams of their species, but also its accumulated wisdom about survival, sacrifice, and the terrible strength that could be forged from weakness. The early colonists were not soldiers or conquerors. They were families, teachers, farmers, and dreamers seeking new homes among the stars. Haven's Rest was one such colony. Established on a verdant world in what the galactic community considered the frontier zones, territories deemed too remote and worthless for the major powers to contest. The human colonists had spent 50 years transforming the planet into a thriving agricultural world, complete with schools, hospitals, and the infrastructure of a peaceful civilization. The population of 2.3 million included nearly 400,000 children. The colony's leader, Maria Santos, had been among the original settlers. She had watched the first generation of true Haven's Rest natives take their first steps, speak their first words, and grow into young adults who knew no other world than the one their parents had carved from the wilderness. To her and to every adult on Haven's Rest, these children represented not just the future of their colony, but the vindication of humanity's greatest gamble, that they could build something beautiful among the stars. What the colonists did not know was that their world had been selected by Zephyrian military strategists as the perfect demonstration of their power to the emerging human presence in their territory. Haven's Rest was isolated, lightly defended, and most importantly, filled with exactly the kind of soft targets that made for effective psychological warfare. Marcus Webb had been weak once. As a child on Earth, he had suffered from a debilitating muscular disorder that left him frail and dependent on others for the most basic tasks. The other children had mocked him, called him useless, predicted he would never amount to anything. In his teenage years, as experimental gene therapy finally gave him strength, Marcus had made a promise to himself that would echo through the cosmos decades later. He would destroy every aspect of weakness within himself, and in doing so become something that could never be destroyed by others. That philosophy had driven him through the grueling training to become a colonial defense force officer, through the years of study that made him one of humanity's foremost experts on xenobiology and psychology, and ultimately to his assignment as Haven's Rest's chief of security. Marcus understood better than most that strength was not about avoiding vulnerability. It was about transforming vulnerability into unbreakable resolve. When the Zephyrian fleet appeared in Haven's Rest system, on what the colonists would later call Black Morning, Marcus was conducting a routine inspection of the colony's modest defensive installations. The alert klaxons began wailing as the massive ships materialized from hyperspace, their hulls bearing the crimson insignia of the hegemony's punishment fleet. The colonist had 18 minutes to prepare. In those 18 minutes, Maria Santos made the hardest decision of her life. Rather than attempt a hopeless evacuation, she ordered all the children to be gathered in the colony's 3 primary schools, reinforced buildings that offered the best protection available. The adults would make their stand at the defensive perimeters, buying time for a distress signal to reach the nearest human outpost, some 47 light-years away. Marcus Webb took command of the defense with a calm that surprised even himself. As he coordinated the colony's few armed shuttles and ground-based weapons, he felt the last vestiges of his childhood weakness burning away like dross in a forge. The scared, frail boy he had once been was dying, replaced by something harder and more focused than Diamond. The Zephyrian assault began with precision orbital bombardments targeting the colony's communication arrays and power generation facilities. Then came the landing craft, disgorging thousands of Zephyrian shock troops onto the peaceful farmland that surrounded the settlement. The creatures were imposing, 3 meters tall, with chitinous exoskeletons and 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Their tactics were brutal but effective, designed to instill maximum terror. But the humans fought back with a ferocity that caught the invaders off guard. Every colonist, from teenagers to the elderly, took up whatever weapons they could find. Farm equipment became improvised weapons of war. Civilian shuttles were rigged with explosives and used as guided missiles. When conventional ammunition ran out, the colonists began manufacturing explosives from agricultural chemicals. For 6 hours, the battle raged across Haven's Rest. Marcus's defense held longer than any military analyst would have thought possible, but ultimately, the outcome was inevitable. The Zephyrians had numerical superiority, better equipment, and centuries of military experience. One by one, the human defensive positions fell. As the aliens closed in on the colony center, Marcus made his final transmission to Maria Santos. The weak self is dead. What comes next, they will not understand. The Zephyrians breached the schools at dawn on the second day. What followed was not warfare, it was systematic slaughter. The alien soldiers moved through the corridors with methodical precision, using their weapons to execute every child they found. The youngest victims were only 4 years old. Teachers who tried to shield their students were killed alongside them. In a span of 3 hours, 400,000 human children died in what the Zephyrians recorded as a standard pacification operation. But the Zephyrians had made a critical error in their understanding of human psychology. They believed, as they had with every other species they had conquered, that the massacre would break human resistance. They transmitted recordings of the slaughter to every human world and outpost, expecting surrender and submission. Instead, they had awakened something that would haunt their nightmares for generations to come. The emergency session of the Human Colonial Council convened within hours of receiving the transmission from Haven's Rest. Representatives from 47 human worlds gathered via quantum entanglement communication, their faces bearing expressions that ranged from grief to rage to something far more dangerous: cold, calculating fury. Director Admiral Sarah Chen, the senior military commander for all human colonial forces, stood before the assembly with the recorded evidence of the massacre playing on screens behind her. "They want us to see this," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "They want us to understand that our children are not safe, that our families are not safe, that there is nowhere in this galaxy where humanity can exist without their permission." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the assembly. "They have fundamentally misunderstood what it means to be human. They have shown us our children dying and expected us to surrender. Instead, they have given us clarity of purpose that our species has not possessed since we left Earth. Every human alive now understands exactly what we are fighting for, and exactly what these creatures are." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, every colony, every outpost, every human settlement in the galaxy would unite under a single banner. The Terran Defense Coalition was born in that moment, forged in grief and tempered in rage. But the coalition was more than just a military alliance. It was a philosophical transformation. The massacre had burned away the last vestiges of humanity's innocence, its willingness to coexist peacefully with those who would harm the defenseless. Like Marcus Webb destroying his own weakness to become something unbreakable, humanity as a species underwent a metamorphosis that would reshape the galaxy. Part 2. The Forging of Retribution. The transformation did not happen overnight. In the 6 months following the Haven's Rest massacre, human space became a hive of activity unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The species that had been dismissed by the major powers as promising but primitive colonists revealed capabilities that shocked even their allies. Elena Vazquez had been working on theoretical applications of quantum mechanics to space warfare for decades, but her research had been considered too dangerous and impractical for development. The massacre changed everything. Within weeks of the attack, she found herself with unlimited funding and resources, tasked with turning theoretical weapons into reality. Her first breakthrough was the development of quantum state missiles that could exist in multiple trajectories simultaneously until the moment of impact, making them virtually impossible to intercept. Captain James Morrison had commanded a small patrol craft on the outer edges of human space, intercepting pirates and escorting merchant vessels. He was a competent officer, but hardly a military genius. The news from Haven's Rest changed him. He began studying every recorded battle in galactic history, analyzing Zephyrian tactics and strategies with obsessive intensity. His insights would later form the foundation of humanity's new military doctrine, a fusion of conventional warfare with psychological manipulation that turned the Zephyrians' own methods against them. Across human space, similar transformations were taking place. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to develop weapons. Engineers converted manufacturing facilities to produce warships. Ordinary citizens enlisted in military training programs, driven by a shared understanding that this was no longer about territory or politics. This was about the survival of human children everywhere. The Zephyrian response to this mobilization was predictably arrogant. High Commander Vexter, the architect of the Haven's Rest operation, issued a statement dismissing human military preparations as the death throes of a broken species. The hegemony had faced desperate enemies before. They always followed the same pattern. Initial defiance, followed by increasingly desperate attacks, and finally submission when the cost became too high. What the Zephyrians could not comprehend was that humanity was not following their expected pattern. Instead of desperate attacks, the humans were methodically building something the galaxy had never seen before, a military force specifically designed to exploit every weakness in Zephyrian psychology and tactics. The first hint that something had changed came during the Battle of Kepler's Stand, a minor Zephyrian outpost that controlled shipping lanes between several human colonies. A small human fleet arrived and demanded the station's surrender. When the Zephyrians refused, the humans did not immediately attack. Instead, they broadcast a signal that filled every Zephyrian communication frequency with the recorded voices of the children who had died at Haven's Rest. For 3 days, every Zephyrian in the system was forced to listen to the final words of human children calling for their parents, begging for their lives, crying in languages the aliens did not understand. The psychological impact was devastating. Zephyrian soldiers began reporting nightmares, panic attacks, and what human psychologists would recognize as symptoms of severe post-traumatic stress. When the attack finally came, it was like nothing the Zephyrians had experienced. Human ships appeared from multiple directions simultaneously, using the quantum state technology Dr. Vasquez had developed. Their weapons targeted not just Zephyrian ships, but the creatures' enhanced sensory organs, overloading them with specific frequencies that caused debilitating pain. Capture pods were deployed not to take prisoners, but to subject captured Zephyrians to recorded testimonies from Haven's Rest survivors, graphic accounts of watching their children die. The station fell in less than 4 hours, but more significantly, recordings of the battle were transmitted throughout Zephyrian space, carrying with them a message that would be repeated at every subsequent engagement. Remember the children of Haven's Rest. We do. High Commander Vextar dismissed the defeat as an isolated incident, the result of local commanders being unprepared for human technological developments. He ordered increased security measures and began planning a massive retaliation that would crush human resistance once and for all. He never got the chance to implement those plans. The quantum state assassination had been Elena Vasquez's most controversial development. Using the same principles as her missiles, it was possible to exist in multiple locations simultaneously until observation collapsed the quantum state. A properly trained operative could be in several places at once, making them effectively undetectable until they chose to act. Marcus Webb had survived Haven's Rest. Badly wounded but alive, he had been rescued from the ruins of the colony's command center and evacuated to a human medical facility. During his recovery, he had volunteered for Dr. Vasquez's most dangerous experimental procedures. The quantum state enhancement process had a mortality rate of 70%, but for those who survived, it offered capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. On the night of the new moon over the Zephyrian homeworld, Marcus Webb materialized in High Commander Vextar's private chambers. The alien leader was reviewing battle plans for the human extermination campaign when he became aware of a presence in the room. Turning, he saw a figure that seemed to shift and blur, existing in multiple positions simultaneously. "You wanted to teach us about weakness," Marcus said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Let me show you what we learned." Vexler reached for his personal weapon, but Marcus was already moving. The quantum enhancement allowed him to experience multiple possibilities simultaneously, to exist in several potential realities until he chose which one to make real. To Vexler, it appeared that multiple humans were attacking from different angles. In reality, Marcus was simply selecting the optimal outcome from an infinite range of possibilities. The High Commander died knowing that he had been killed by the same weakness he had sought to exploit. Marcus left behind a recording device that would broadcast his final message to every Zephyrian in their home system. I was weak once. You taught me to destroy that weakness. Now I am something you cannot comprehend, and I am coming for all of you. But Marcus Webb was not acting alone. Across Zephyrian space, similar assassinations were taking place. Human operatives enhanced with quantum state technology were eliminating military leaders, government officials, and anyone else responsible for the Haven's Rest massacre. Each death was accompanied by the same message, the same promise of retribution. The Zephyrian hegemony, which had ruled through fear for millennia, suddenly found itself afraid. Their military commanders were dying in locked rooms. Their communication networks were being infiltrated with the voices of dead human children. Their own psychological warfare tactics were being turned against them with ruthless efficiency. More disturbing still was the realization that the humans were not acting out of mere vengeance. Every action was precisely calculated to achieve maximum psychological impact while advancing strategic military objectives. The assassination campaign had not just eliminated enemy leadership. It had created a power vacuum that allowed human forces to advance through Zephyrian territory with minimal resistance. Within 8 months of the Haven's Rest massacre, human fleets had captured or destroyed 47 Zephyrian military installations. Every victory was marked by the same ritual: recordings of the children's voices broadcast on all frequencies, followed by the systematic capture of Zephyrian personnel for educational purposes. The prisoners were not tortured in the conventional sense. Instead, they were subjected to immersive virtual reality experiences that forced them to live through the Haven's Rest massacre from the perspective of the human children. They experienced the terror, the confusion, the desperate hope for rescue that never came. Most emerged from these sessions psychologically broken, unable to function as soldiers. The few who retained their sanity carried with them a new understanding of what they had awakened in humanity, and their testimonies spread throughout the remaining Zephyrian forces like a plague of despair. Part 3. The Price of Innocence Lost. The final phase of Earth's retaliation began exactly 1 year after the Haven's Rest massacre. By this time, the Zephyrian hegemony had been reduced to a fraction of its former territory, its military might shattered by a human war machine that seemed to grow stronger with each victory. The surviving Zephyrian leadership had retreated to their most heavily fortified systems, desperately trying to find some way to negotiate an end to the conflict. But negotiation was no longer possible. Humanity had moved beyond such concepts as limited war or political objectives. The massacre had transformed the species into something new, something that the galactic community struggled to understand or categorize. They were no longer fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for the complete elimination of anyone who would harm human children. Director Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TDF Retribution, the first of humanity's new dreadnought-class vessels. The ship was more than just a weapon of war. It was a monument to the transformed nature of human civilization. Its hull bore the names of every child who had died at Haven's Rest, etched in quantum-stabilized metal that would endure for millennia. Its weapon systems incorporated technologies that had been theoretical impossibilities just 2 years earlier. Final phase begins today, she announced to the assembled fleet of nearly 1,000 vessels. Each ship carried the same message carved into its hull, the same promise of justice for the dead children of Haven's Rest. We end this not just for our fallen, but to ensure that no species in this galaxy will ever again believe that human children are acceptable targets. The assault on the Zephyrian home system was unlike anything in galactic military history. Human ships emerged from quantum space at precisely calculated intervals, their arrival timed to create maximum psychological impact. The quantum state technology that had once been used for assassination was now deployed on a massive scale, creating the illusion of a fleet 10 times larger than it actually was. But the most devastating weapon in the human arsenal was not technological, it was philosophical. The broadcast began as human ships entered the system's outer perimeter, transmitted on every frequency simultaneously. It was not the voices of dead children this time, but something far more terrifying: the recorded testimonies of Marcus Webb and others like him, describing in clinical detail the process by which they had destroyed their own weakness to become something unbreakable. "We were gardeners once," Marcus's voice echoed through the system. "We were teachers and farmers and dreamers. You made us into weapons by showing us what we needed to protect. The weak child I once was died on Haven's Rest, burned away in the fire of your cruelty. What stands before you now is what remains when weakness is stripped away. Pure purpose, uncompromising resolve, and the absolute certainty that those who harm our children will face consequences beyond their ability to imagine." The psychological impact on the Zephyrian defenders was immediate and catastrophic. Many simply abandoned their posts, unable to face an enemy that had transformed their greatest strength, psychological warfare, into an instrument of their own destruction. Others fought with the desperation of cornered animals, but their coordination was shattered by the knowledge that they faced an opponent who had learned to use their own fear against them. The battle for the Zephyrian homeworld lasted 3 days. When it ended, the planet's military installations had been systematically destroyed, its government infrastructure dismantled, and its leadership captured for educational processing. But humanity's victory was more than military, it was existential. The Zephyrian hegemony, which had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years, had been not just defeated but psychologically broken by the very tactics it had once used against others. In the aftermath of the victory, however, something unexpected happened. As human forces occupied the former Zephyrian territories, they encountered something they had not anticipated. Vast populations of civilian aliens who had lived under hegemony rule for generations. These were not warriors or oppressors, but families, children, and innocents who had never participated in the atrocities committed by their government. The discovery forced humanity to confront a question that would define their future in the galaxy. What did it mean to have destroyed their own weakness if that transformation led them to become the very thing they had fought against? Dr. Elena Vasquez, the architect of humanity's quantum weapons program, found herself standing in a Zephyrian orphanage on the planet Kethmore, looking into the terrified eyes of alien children who cowered at the sight of human soldiers. These young beings had never heard of Haven's Rest, had never participated in the massacre, but they bore the genetic markers of the species that had committed genocide against human children. "We became strong by learning to destroy our own weakness," she said to Admiral Chen during a private communication. "But if we harmed these children, what does that make us? Have we become strong, or have we simply become the monsters we once feared?" The question divided human leadership and sparked the most intense philosophical debate in their species' history. Some argued that the complete elimination of the Zephyrian genetic line was necessary to ensure that such atrocities could never happen again. Others insisted that humanity's strength lay not in becoming monsters themselves, but in choosing to be better than their enemies even in the moment of ultimate victory. Marcus Webb, the quantum-enhanced operative who had begun the assassination campaign, provided the answer that would guide humanity's choice. Speaking from the ruins of High Commander Vex's fortress, he addressed the human fleet. "I destroyed my weakness to become something that could not be destroyed by others. But I did not become a destroyer of innocence. The weak child I once was would have cowered before these alien children, out of fear. The strong man I have become can choose to protect them, just as I would protect any human child. Strength is not the absence of mercy, it is the power to choose mercy, even when vengeance would be easier." The decision that followed would reshape the galactic political landscape. Instead of exterminating the remaining Zephyrian populations, humanity chose to dismantle their military apparatus while protecting their civilians. Former Zephyrian worlds became human protectorates. Their inhabitants guaranteed the same rights and protections as human citizens. The children who had once cowered in fear of human soldiers grew up in schools built by human engineers, learning alongside human children about cooperation and peace. But humanity's transformation was irreversible. The species that had once sought only to build peaceful colonies among the stars had become the galaxy's ultimate guardians of innocence. Their military doctrine, refined through the crucible of total war, was based on a simple principle. Any force that targeted children or civilians would face the full weight of human retaliation, swift and merciless. The phrase, "the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," became humanity's unofficial motto, carved into the hull of every human warship and inscribed above the entrance to every human military academy. But it was understood now in its complete context. Destroying weakness meant not just becoming strong, but becoming strong enough to choose when to show mercy and when to show force. Epilogue. The legacy of Haven's Rest. 50 years have passed since the Haven's Rest massacre. The galaxy is a very different place than it was before those 3 days of slaughter changed the course of history. The major powers, once confident in their ability to project force against smaller civilizations, now approach interstellar relations with a caution that borders on reverence. Everyone understands the lesson that humanity taught them. There are lines that cannot be crossed without facing consequences beyond calculation. The monument on Haven's Rest has been rebuilt, not as a tomb, but as a living memorial. The names of the 400,000 children who died there are etched in quantum crystal that captures and preserves their voices from home recordings, allowing visitors to hear them laugh and play and dream of futures they would never see. Around the monument stands a city built by representatives of 43 different alien species, all of them former enemies who learned the hard way what it meant to threaten human children. Marcus Webb, now in his 70s but still enhanced by the quantum technology that makes him effectively immortal, serves as the memorial's keeper. Children from across the galaxy come to learn about the events that changed everything, to understand how weakness can be transformed into strength, and how strength can be transformed into wisdom. On quiet evenings, when the last tour groups have departed and the memorial stands empty except for the eternal flames that burn in memory of the dead, Marcus sometimes speaks to the names etched in crystal. He tells them about the galaxy they helped create through their sacrifice, about the countless alien children who now grow up safe because their deaths made it clear that innocence itself has guardians. "You were not weak," he whispers to the memorial wall. "You were the strongest of all of us, because you remained innocent in a galaxy that tried to crush innocence. We became strong enough to protect what you represented, but we could never replace what was lost when you died." The human fleets that patrol the galaxy today carry with them more than just weapons and armor. They carry the memory of children who died because they were vulnerable, and the ironclad commitment that such vulnerability will never again be seen as weakness to be exploited. Humanity learned the hardest lesson the galaxy could teach, that true strength comes not from the absence of weakness, but from the transformation of weakness into unshakable purpose. The massacre of human children at Haven's Rest was intended to break humanity's spirit and force their submission. Instead, it forged a species into something the galaxy had never seen before. Guardians who had destroyed their own capacity for weakness without losing their capacity for mercy. Protectors who could choose between compassion and destruction with the wisdom born of ultimate loss. The Zephyrian hegemony is remembered now only as a cautionary tale, their military doctrine studied in academies across the galaxy as an example of how psychological warfare can backfire catastrophically when applied to a species capable of learning from its own vulnerability. Their former territories thrive under human protection, their children growing up in a peace their ancestors never knew. And in the depths of space, human ships continue their eternal patrol, carrying the voices of dead children as their battle cry, and the promise that innocence will never again stand undefended. They are the living embodiment of humanity's greatest transformation, the species that destroyed its own weakness to become the galaxy's conscience, teaching the universe that those who harm children will face retribution beyond their ability to comprehend or survive. A man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. Humanity proved that truth among the stars, and the galaxy will never forget the lesson. Final classification note. This document serves as both historical record and strategic deterrent. Distribution is authorized to all galactic civilizations as a reminder of the consequences of targeting civilian populations, particularly children, in military operations. The events described herein are fully verified through multiple independent sources and quantum temporal archaeology. Memorial access. The Haven's Rest Memorial is open to visitors from all species. Educational programs are available in 1847 languages. Those seeking to understand humanity's transformation from peaceful colonists to galactic guardians are encouraged to walk among the names of those whose sacrifice made that transformation necessary. Remember them. Protect the innocent. Choose strength over weakness, mercy over vengeance, and wisdom over power. These are the lessons written in the stars by the blood of children who died too young, but whose deaths ensured that no other children would face the same fate.